Okay, welcome everybody. And I just saw Javier joining on there too. We're glad Javier is able to join us. Friends, we're here to talk about Infogram and in the context of data visualization that all of our journalists, tools that all of our journalists can use, and in a wider context still of data and investigative techniques that underpin great journalism. So this is part of a 10-part series we've been doing this summer. I'll put in the chat links to the stuff that we've done over the last couple of weeks and signups for the things to come. I think it's been a great series, mostly because it's been led by fellow journalists among us who are practicing these skills in the conduct of their everyday reporting. And that's true here with Aaron Coy and Aleshu Biak, who are going to be, they've led a team of, 5 or 6 people who have worked on this conversation. So I'm going to hand it over to them. Glad to have also Jim Sargent and Javier Zarathina from USA Today from our graphics and visual storytelling team there. So I know they'll join in along the way. Like I said, I'll keep track of the questions and interject as needed on your behalf. Also, we'll handle the recording and get that out to all of you at the end of this. So I'll hand it over to you two.
Cool. Thanks, Mackenzie. I will start us off and get a screen share going. We have a few examples to kick us off, and then we will both go through kind of a walkthrough of a graphic, both Alessia and I. So kind of set aside a quick turn graphic is what I'm calling it, and the kind of a more involved graphic, a more advanced, to kind of show you the variety we can have in Infogram here. So this one was done here in Milwaukee a couple of years ago with a student turnover series that we did with Aaron Richards, who's now at USA Today. And this is a simple bar chart in Infogram. It has 3 columns, which I'll pull up the data in a second. It has 3 columns that has the school names, the enrollment numbers for those virtual schools, and the turnover rate for those, like, attendance in those schools. So this with bar charts and Infogram, sometimes if you have more than one value, it'll pop it over into a second tab. So you can have 2 bar charts at once, which is pretty cool. There's also a way I'll show here quick where you can turn off that tab option if you don't want that. And if you want to, say, break it into 2 charts with the same thing, so you can quickly duplicate the same chart and set this to default to show, so you can stack 2 bar charts instead if you would rather not have the tabbing. So this is what the data looks like in Infogram, and that's how it feeds. So you have your schools, your enrollment numbers, and your turnover rate. So that is a simple bar chart that we've used in the past. I'll go on real quick to a little bit more complex. And if there's any questions that pop up, flag me. I can't see the chat, or just start chiming in, unmute.
I'll let you know if and when they're on.
Yeah, cool. This one is a little bit more complex, and I didn't actually make this, one of my team members did. And you'll see right away a little bit of a no-no. This is not using our Gannett template styles and fonts, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. Infogram has preset templates courtesy of Gannett giving our fonts and some of our typefaces and font styles and colors to Infogram to preset for us. So my coworker did not at the time use that template when this popped up. So we'll show that when we get into our examples.
And that's good, Aaron. That's a subject of exactly of what a question somebody's asking. And so when that time comes, let's make sure that Javier and Jim can speak up on that too.
For sure. This example, you'll see it is a bar chart, but it also has a line component to it. You'll see this is a little bit more complex. It has 2 axes. Sometimes that's not the best option for charting. It kind of depends on what you're visualizing. In this case, it tends to work. We took our COVID numbers looking specifically at long-term care facilities in Wisconsin area. And Wisconsin at one point wasn't reporting a big chunk of deaths that they were marking them as unknown housing situations. And then on a certain date, they decided to backlog or backtrack all of those unknowns and drop them into a long-term care category. So we saw a massive increase in the percentage of long-term care deaths. So this is kind of a combination of showing where those categories got changed. So that is my two quick examples that we'll go through. I'll show you the data on that as well real quick, just so you can see there are different chart types that you can select when you set this up, which we'll get to in showing how that sets up. But you'll see specifically with this chart type and the data, it lets you set which of your values you want to be the line. So for example, the percentages are marked as the line, and you could flip that to column or line. So depends on what three values with this specific chart type, you're able to kind of flip which one works for your lines, which one works for your columns on your bars. Okay, I'm going to jump out of my examples and let LSU jump in on some map examples that he's made.
Thank you, and I'm glad Javier's here because he made this. The template here. So the cool thing with Infogram is you can kind of upload some of your own designs. You can upload polygons that you would fill in with a color and assign that color or that polygon a tooltip, right? So that when you would hover over it, something would show up. So this example early in the vaccine distribution, kind of comparing states. So that's a kind of custom design that we worked with Javier and his team to put together. Other mapping examples, there's plenty of, let's say, countries or the U.S. by state, by county, specific states with kind of county demarcations. You can do those kinds of things in Infogram, and a lot of those are pre-loaded, which is great. But you can also drop in your own. So if you were here last week for the data wrapper session, we also had a similar conversation about going and finding shape files or requesting them. If they're fairly custom, fairly unique, you can request them from an agency, or there are other places, or things like the OpenStreetMap community or other kind of open sourcing mapping communities that have collected these kinds of shape files. Worst comes to worst, you can build them yourself. But anyway, this is, for instance, hospital referral regions. And so you can find this doing some Googling and then convert those shape files to a format that'll work for Infogram, generally like GeoJSON or TopoJSON. All this kind of stuff, right? Like, I wasn't born knowing this. None of us who do this stuff daily know this. Like, we just Google around. We kind of figure this out. We ask our colleagues. And most important for Infogram, or really any of these kinds of tools, is just take it for a spin. Just play with it. Just try to recreate a graphic that you're interested in, or just a new kind of format that you're interested in. So why don't I steal, Aaron, your the screen away from you, and maybe we'll run. Or did you want to run one first and then I can run one?
I'm fine with either. I have one set up, or if you want to jump in, I can run through mine.
Why don't we take them for a spin before I just talk too much about the promise of this kind of a tool? I think if everyone can just quickly sign up, if you haven't already, it's free. Just get a kind of a dummy profile going so you can practice with us.
Okay, I'm gonna pop back this. Okay, so when we have an account here, you'll see this. So this is our Milwaukee Enterprise account, but you'll see kind of a library of sorts of the various charts that have been made. You can create different folders if you'd like to drop in specific. So if you need to reuse a chart for some reason in another story, you can easily find them and kind of repopulate. You'll see these options up here for team templates that you can kind of pre-build, infographics and charts, which aren't too different. You can kind of, infographic here kind of shows you multiple charts in one page, maps, any one of these you can kind of select to get going. So I'm going to select a chart here. And you'll see once you're in a enterprise account of some sort, you'll have these preset Gannett with lines, without lines templates to start from. And these are where we'll get our fonts and our color schemes to keep everything consistent. So I'm going to run through a quick stacked bar chart that I have. And you'll see it'll pre-populate a chart in here just to get you started. You can easily click on it, hit your delete button, and it'll disappear. So the data I'm working with, if any of you have been paying attention to sports, go sports. These are MVP winners that counts for each major sports league here. And of course, in Milwaukee, we're all watching the Bucks. So this has been a big deal for Giannis and the Bucks here. So I have this data for MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, MVP winners for the various market areas that I have in this final format. If you were part of the pivot table training session, it was one of the first ones that kicked off. I used that to get my data in order. So one tip I will say with Infogram is you want to make sure your data is really clean and really ready to go in the best possible format, because it can be a little tricky to work with the data in the table once it's in Infogram. So you'll see over here in my pivot table, it's alphabetical here, but in order for my final chart, I want them ranked by the highest, the market that has the highest number of MVPs. So I reordered them to go from highest to lowest before I even drop it in my Infogram. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to copy this data. There are ways you'll see once you start getting a chart going. So before I get too far ahead of myself, you'll see this menu on the left gives you options for adding text, adding your chart types. So right away, I'm going to drop this stacked bar chart in here, and we'll get back to that. You can add a map in here. So this is where else she was mentioning that if I were to type in Wisconsin, we have Wisconsin counties is already preset in here. And when we started doing Infogram maps, we actually submitted a bunch of shape files to Infogram to get some of our zip codes and our congressional districts and Senate districts in there already for us. And then you can also have the ability to drop in images. You can get towards that at the end. There are options to use Infogram as kind of an embedding tool to get around some odd quirks with embeds. But getting back to our stacked bar chart here, see it pre-fills a bunch of data for you when you choose a chart. What I usually do down at the bottom here, you can do a quick clear all data, and I'm going to copy and paste my data in. There are options to upload a file if you have a CSV or Excel sheet. You can connect a Google Drive account or a Sheet account. I don't tend to do that just in case it overrides someone else's account that gets connected to like the Milwaukee enterprise account. I just don't want to mess with any kind of account setups there, but you can put in JSON. They have add from Dropbox. So there's different options to upload your data if you have any of like the database, MySQL, Postgres. But from here, what you'll see is you'll see a very long chart, and you'll see our different market areas. You'll see you hover over and you get the MVP numbers from the MLB, NBA, NHL, NFL. And you'll see that it's set in our Gannett colors, and we have our Gannett fonts over here with our axis already. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm going to, try and minimize my height a little bit here because it's a little bit long. It's something you just kind of have to play with, see how small the bars get. If you lose some of your names over here, you might have to lengthen it. So instead of, I'll just leave it at this for now while we figure that out. I like to move my legend from the bottom to the top. So right away you can see what colors correspond with what leagues. And you'll see with axis, we want to give our bottom axis a label so we know what we're working with here. So number of, where are we at? MVP winners. You'll see when I clicked off there, you get a different set of settings here. So if you lost like where your settings are, just make sure you click on your chart again and it'll pop back over. And then you can also set your different scales down here. So I kind of want my scales to be by 5. So we don't have quite as many grid lines, but you can still follow. And then we want to make sure our fonts are there. And this is where we can adjust our font sizes in bold or italics if we want to. If we have tabs, that like that first bar chart I showed, that's where that will show up. Access labels, I might bump that down lower, or I might bump that up. That might be a way to counter the length, the height of this if I bump down the font a little bit. But again, there's some readability standards we have, so we can talk to Javier about his recommendations. And then we have, again, font sizes and everything for our legends and values. One thing you'll notice is tooltips, not a whole lot of customization options. You can either show it or hide it on a lot of these charts. One thing to note is if you don't really want your users to have to hover over and see these values, sometimes I like to turn these off and go to chart properties, and you can show values on your chart, which will put your values right in the bars. Depending on the size of your bars, like you'll see some of these are too small to actually get the value numbers in there. So as long as you have like a single full bar chart, if you're not doing a stacked bar chart, sometimes that's the better option. So it's a bit more static. You're not asking your users to do too much to see the values. In this case, it's probably better that we have the tooltip because of those small bars. And you have accessibility options too, so you can make sure screen readers can read it, and you can give it a description. So when we have someone using a screen reader, that it's easy to use and making sure our data is still visible to them. Number formats, typically we use the commas, so I think that's kind of a default. And you can change, let's see, I don't know. Do I need that? Yeah, you can change a little bit of the tooltip in labeling just by unchecking and checking apply prefix. I don't think that really adjusts much on my end here, but depending on your data, that is where you would get a little bit more nuanced data format. So if you, for example, needed a percentage after your number, you could add a % here and that would show up. These aren't percents though, so we don't want that. In terms of setting some of our other, so if you off click here, some of our other settings, you'll notice you can set your width of the chart too. I think 550, 540-ish is about where our body of text kind of width in a normal Presto story is. So you kind of want to keep it in that range. It's where you can set custom logos with your enterprise account. Usually you can set a logo to go on all of them. For this is Journal Sentinel. And you can do sharing options. If you don't want people to be able to share it, you can turn off sharing. You can turn on custom share link, which I think you can include like a short URL, or another outside link. There's some allow for public download. This is kind of similar to a data wrapper scenario where you should be able to download the data behind this if you check that allow for public download. So yeah, just some clicking around and figuring out your various settings here. If for some reason you accidentally choose like a non-Gannett template, you can always change that. So for example, I can jump in here and like, oh, I wanted the one with lines. So I'll flip it over and make sure I have like the lines template on here. And then always make sure, Alicia will get into this on his tips next, but always make sure we have our headline, which you can drag and drop or just click. And that will insert headline, get your body text for some chatter if you have it. If it will work for me. And then get your source lines. Source lines always important. Caption text is usually the right size for that. And once you get into editing, you'll see it's just kind of a double click and go. You can adjust the font sizes and the weights of our Unify Sans font in any of these text fields. Yep, full kind of custom text options here. Okay, any questions? I'm gonna step back and let you take over on another example.
Awesome. Yeah, so keep dropping your questions in the chat. We're learning a lot together. All right, so let me take you through something that a line chart and then some mapping. So I'll do a point map with latitude and longitude, mostly so that you get a kind of hang of the kind of tricky parts with Infogram. It's very tricky. There are other things out there, right? We showed data wrapper.de. I recommend you all taking any number of tools for a spin, especially when you're maybe you've got a data set and you just want to explore it as part of your reporting, or you want to kind of run some numbers by a source to try to see what they say about it. Sometimes some of these have a strong learning curve, and you don't necessarily want to get that perfect map in Infogram if you're not going to publish it on Presto. So here's a story. So this we did this today, and I did 2 infograms for the piece. So we're looking at COVID patients in the hospitals. So a scatter plot here made with Infogram showing vaccination of states, vaccination rate versus COVID in the ICU rate. And then also kind of to demonstrate this idea of younger patients driving hospitalizations now, the proportion of 18 to 49-year-olds kind of doubling in the last 6 months, and the kind of seniors decreasing since January. So that was something that we'd been hearing it in our reporting. Basically, we talked to like 6 hospitals on Monday, and then I ran to try to figure out what kind of data I could find to tell kind of a national picture of what a lot of these hospitals and health systems and state kind of medical associations were saying. So as anyone who's covered COVID in the last year and a half knows, the CDC and HHS have data of varying quality, but we have this interesting kind of sampling of 10% of the US population in COVID hospitalizations. So I downloaded that data, and if you click through to the link I shared in the chat, you'll get here. There's only one of you in here, but that's okay. You can save it for later. And essentially, here's all the steps I took. I wrote here in column G, right? So go to the data source, download the data, unzip the folder, find this file, which has the kind of proportions by age group for COVID hospitalizations. And then I brought it over into here. So you may open it in something like Excel first. And like Aaron said, I mean, Infogram requires your data to be in exactly the format that it likes, or else it's going to throw an error, or else the line's not going to show up. So you kind of tend to spend a little bit of time working through the fickle nature of that beast. Yet once it works, and it embeds really well. And it has a really great kind of set of features and formats that work. Anyway, so I dropped in the CDC data into a kind of spreadsheet like this. So I'll bring it over, I'll clean it up, I'll bring it out of Excel into something like this, get it all ready. I had to do a bunch of things that's kind of too boring to explain right now in terms of CDC weeks and kind of converting that into weeks. So if you have an Infogram open, like Aaron showed you, I mean, instead of kind of selecting your bar charts, your stacked bars, you can select line chart, right? So, chart type, you can change, you can try any number of things. And we encourage you to try these and kind of get a peek under the hood of what the data structure looks like for any of these, right? How Infogram wants you to load in the data. But in this case, if you paste over the data that I have in that Google Sheet, and if you just kind of select it all, copy it, bring it over, paste it in, you can see that this is the way that Infogram likes the data to be structured, which is good because in the case of this data set, the CDC actually publishes it in these kind of age group columns. So that made it really easy. In other cases, you may have to kind of transpose the data, and feel free to ask. I'll remind everyone later, like we have weekly office hours at the data team here at USA Today. So like, if you ever have questions about that, we're happy to answer and help. But essentially, this is what I want. So like Aaron just showed you, right? I mean, throw on a legend, figure out whether you want it on the top or bottom, throw in your axis labels, your source and credit lines, title and chatter. I like to kind of prepare everything in a document like this, kind of have everything ready to go. So here's my head, here's my chatter, source and credit, like have everything kind of ready to go. Beware of pasting things into Infogram. Sometimes it'll totally mess with the in-house style. And for sure, you want to do things like make sure, what I tend to do is kind of replicate one of the, here, I'll take it to my kind of Infogram account. So like I have plenty of these that I've worked on in the past. If I want to do another, dot map just like this, I'll just go in and I'll create a duplicate. You may have that also in your kind of templates, but it's just the way that the way that I do it. So another thing I want to show you all is once this thing is done, right? Let's pretend this is done. You can share it privately with your teammates or your editor. I do that because I'm always getting feedback. Hey, is this clear? Should these colors change? I tend to bother Javier a little too much. Maybe I should bother Jim some more, and other folks. I think Aaron is going to be someone I'm running these things past. So it's great to kind of get feedback. I mean, especially on the size of text on annotations and kind of the little text. Like beware of that, because once these things kind of go to the various screens that people read this news on, sometimes it just gets way too small. Anyway, you can share this, but once you're ready to go and you got that embed code, I want to show you something, and I'll share this link, which Javier had turned me on to 6 months ago when I started here, which is something they developed to wrap any number of things in a kind of extra iframe. So this is an extra bit of HTML that'll help these things embed, not just in Presto, but in any of the kind of republishing platforms, right? So AMP, MSN, Yahoo News, a lot of those tend to do extra things or do weird things to our content. So if you drop the Infogram embed code, so that's what I copied right out of here, embed, and literally just hit generate embed code, it'll give you this whole iframe, plus some JavaScript, right? So it'll give you HTML, and you should just copy all of this and throw that into Presto. I don't have the Presto open right now, but it's basically you add the embed and then you add custom HTML, throw in a title, and paste this embed code in. And that has been really helpful. And so far, I haven't had many issues. I'll get to this in 1 second, but I just want to show you all. There's a mobile feature to designing some of these things. Sorry, I'm jumping around so much. Too many tabs. Who's had that issue? Raise your hand. So if you're kind of designing and you think you're going to have an issue with mobile, ooh, am I not even seeing it over here? There should be a little section that says mobile. Accessibility may not be on this one. It may be when you're designing a chart and it's starting to kind of get large. So for instance, I'll just bring you over to an example of when this happened. Okay, well, I can't find it right now, but basically it's this chart. So when I designed it with 3 line charts across, that you could imagine that as screens get smaller, like if you're looking at this on a mobile phone, that's going to get really small, and you can't really. Can you guys all still see that? It's getting really, really small. So there's a little switch you can flip on Infogram, and it'll let you design it for mobile. And so here's that thing. So it let me lay out the 3 charts vertically when it's on mobile, and then when I flip it back to desktop, it kind of retains my original design. So that's a feature. Another feature is this, as you can tell, is not interactive because I actually built this as an image. I built it in R, and then I brought it into Adobe or some kind of editor, and then I added a bunch of annotations and stuff. That's, as Aaron mentioned, a way to get around some of the kind of the finicky nature of Infogram when there's certain things you can't do, like a scatter plot that's also sized, right? That you're sizing the dots. I don't think you can do that. Generally, the scatter plots that we do in Infogram look like this, right? Where you can map it to some variables and the name of the state, for instance, and you can throw in a trend line. You can only throw in a linear regression trend line, but that's the kind of extent to the scatter plots you can do, which is generally strong enough. Okay, so I'll just, because we have this, just want to show you a map to show you the kind of finicky nature of this whole thing. That's the original CDC data that we were playing with. Okay, so this I got from Washington Post's GitHub account. They haven't updated it in a while, but it's basically every school shooting since Columbine. They have it in a kind of larger spreadsheet with a whole bunch of other variables to this. But I want to show you kind of the way that if you wanted to build a dot map, right? This is the kind of way that you'd have to format it. So I'm going to copy all of this so you can see it. You all are in here, you can see this too, but I have school name, casualties, group, which is actually the year. This will become apparent later why I'm done doing this. Coordinates are condensed into one cell, right? So the latitude and longitude are put into one cell, and then school name, which just becomes the label. So you'll kind of get a sense for how finicky the tool is, but how it's also fairly powerful because I just paste this thing in and all of a sudden I have a dot map, right? So, mapped to each of those latitude and longitude, I now have the kind of location for each of those school shootings, and it shouldn't be, that's casualties that we're showing in terms and sizing the bubble by. And so you can go in, to your to all of these kinds of the features in the tool and change some of this, right? So you can imagine, and we can have debates about this, right? How large you should be mapping these variables, what's ethical, there you go. So this is fairly interesting, and we're always down to talk about this kind of stuff. But you can change things as Aaron was showing you. Data format here. So kill. This is so we want to say casualties, and that'll show up in the the legend, or unfortunately, it'll show up in the tooltip. It won't show up in the legend. So the legend's an issue here. You can't, unlike other data visualization platforms, show the size of those circles. I don't think anyone's. Aaron, have you gotten around that? Has anyone using Infogram done that? Or Jim or Javier, have you guys built kind of custom legends that kind of show size and those kinds of things?
You can, but I just haven't found that it's. I mean, I think it's kind of, you can tell right there where the major shootings were, and so I think for, you know, as a reader, I can tell, okay, you know, Denver has a lot of shootings, so you know, a lot of casualties. So I guess that would be my. I mean, I don't know if those circles do any. They give you some sort of sense, but I also think it's not a super big deal to have them.
Yeah, one solution is could be just adding a label on one of the ones that has a big number of, and that kind of gives you, okay, if that circle is 20 or 34, you can infer that the small circle is 1 or 2 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and we've gotten around a lot of the shortcomings of Infogram by being really creative in the chatter and in the headline, right, and kind of explaining some of those things that really pop out. So that's one way to get around it.
Yeah, we've always been extremely explicit in our like wording and like doing some like italicized text, like school or bubbles are sized by number of shootings in this region, or sometimes we've even created our own legend outside of Infogram and used that image embed feature and added an image on top of the map or on top of the chart in order to kind of create a custom legend if it's really necessary.
So, I mean, so I have a bunch of tips. I'm sure if ever people have questions, I mean, let's go. I think I've shot from the hip a lot with trying to figure out what Infogram is going to work, and sometimes, you know, and getting feedback is huge because we've killed infograms that just like don't work for the story. And I think like you gotta be down to kill your darlings. So sometimes I'll create 3 for the same story so that one of them gets through.
Yes, so I'm looking at the questions right now, and the lion's share of the questions are kind of Jim Sargent's kind of spoken to it. It's people who are excited about the tool. They want to get an account. They want to get access to be able to use it. Javier has put in some tools about not just our style in particular, but more broadly, some reading on styles and other frameworks for visual storytelling. I haven't seen any questions recently that you haven't answered about how do I do X, Y, or Z within the tool, but now's a good time if anybody wants to ask that. Yeah, go ahead.
If I can, one thing that I would like to mention is like, okay, so we have so many tools: Flourish, Data Wrapper, Infogram, you know, all these tools of data visualization, and all of them address different necessities. When we think of Infogram, we should think that Infogram is not created strictly as a data visualization tool like Data Wrapper or Flourish. This is more like to creating online graphics and marketing and presentations. Think of it more like a PowerPoint. Infogram is not unlike PowerPoint. Data Wrapper is not unlike Excel. In that sense, Infogram allows you many more options of presentation because you can move visual elements. You have shapes, you have animation, you have lines, you have fonts, you have a lot of stuff that probably you don't need it, but you may use it. And sometimes we have been able to use some of those tools to cover some of the shortcomings. So you have more freedom, you have less control. Like Data Wrapper, I always say Data Wrapper is it's difficult to do a bar chart in Data Wrapper. It's not so difficult to do a bar chart in Infogram because you have many more options. But if you are willing to invest the time to control all the many options and all the many all the many options, you can create really very sophisticated visualization. Jean, for instance, is a wizard of Infogram. He has pushed Infogram, I think, beyond the limits of what even the developers of Infogram have been think that is possible. The other thing that I would like to mention is, and people have asked about the styles and fonts and colors and all the stuff. I think I'm not very obsessed. I think that we should keep a consistency across the publications, obviously, but I wouldn't obsess too much about, especially about color, because I think that you have to use the elements of design to convey the information, and that's the key thing. If you and our styles and our fonts and our colors and all the stuff, they're already thought for that to a degree. But if you find that you need, I need an extra color, or I need to fonts, I wouldn't change ever, because all the publications across Gannett use Unify. But in terms of colors, I think that we have a little bit more flexibility in the use of those tools. And that's all my 2 cents about this.
That's excellent, and thanks for clarifying, Javier, how you see each of these tools kind of doing a specific job really well and maybe better than the others. I think that goes along well though with a point that both Alessio and Aaron made, which is to sort of push the boundaries and hack them a little bit. Like Aaron talked about using this tool in combination with something else, some other imagery tool, and combining the two. And that's where I want to just encourage folks. We've got the digital optimization team, the DOT, that many of your newsrooms work with. We have the Design Center for the print publications, and both of those groups, you're not alone, right? So if you have an idea and you can only think you can take it so far, but you need help combining more than just either of these tools on their own with something else, those are visual professionals that can help you make some special things happen. So don't feel as though you have to master everything right here and now. Your best thing that you can do is have a clear idea of the story you're trying to tell, and you're not alone in trying to tell it if you need help. Okay, other questions? Let's see. Alessio, you were posting some things in here. I'm just reading it. The table feature. Did you want to say anything more about the table feature? Or have you said all you wanted to say there?
Data Wrapper has one too, and I think it can be kind of overused, or maybe hitting the reader over the head with 100 rows. Be careful in kind of what you're trying to present with the table, but one with maybe 10 or fewer is going to be, it can be stronger than a chart in some case, if you're really just trying to show a certain thing. But yeah, I think if you could tell, like, we all love to nerd out about the kind of design questions here and the debate. So yeah, I would love to chat with anyone who wants to kind of talk about this stuff.
And that point, let's not sacrifice cleverness for clarity. If there's a beautiful picture that doesn't tell the story as clearly as a table of numbers, then you've kind of overthought it. I think I kind of hear you saying that. So let's put ourselves in the reader's shoes and make sure that we're telling the story as clearly and as best as it possibly can be. All right, last crack at questions while we have this team here. And looks like, Aaron, you're putting an example. Did you want to just say a little bit about what that is? With your mic on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So this was, I think, a kind of a share card in a sense that we exported as an image, I think we exported one of these as an image for a social share card of some sort. And we were able to kind of highlight a politician, his like small profile, and kind of some of his stats, according to a Marquette law poll that came out before an election. So that was kind of, I think we put this in the story, and we also made 2 share cards so you could see both of these charts side by side. in relation to this policy. So that's just an example of how you can add an image, text, and a chart all in kind of one infogram shell.
Perfect. Okay. I'm just thanks for explaining that, and I'm just saying, writing a little thank you note to both of you right there for your help, and to Jim and Javier as well. If you found this workshop interesting, and I know from the comments many of you did, there are a handful left in this series coming up. There's one on the best sources of raw data for education beat writers. One on the best raw sources for and how you can sort of go through it, organize, manipulate, filter these data on inequality, which is of course like the story of our time right now. There's one called What Do You Mean? It's Not Statistically Significant, which is I'm really looking forward to. One of our journalists from Detroit has a PhD in this topic, and that looks to be fantastic. So there's a link to get signed up for all those. And I think I might have mentioned in this chat as well, this series came out of NICAR. Everybody who's teaching the series earned a scholarship to NICAR. We're going to do a similar series for those who are in scholarships to IRE coming up, and that'll unfold over the course of the fall and into the winter. So if there are specific topics you'd like to learn more about as relates to investigative journalism, my name is Mackenzie Warren. Be in touch with me, and I will make that happen for you. And if you're interested in going to NICAR or IRE next year, I'd like to hear from you as well. So with that, we'll say thank you to our teachers and our students alike, and we'll see you at next week's session. So take care, everybody.